Hello, everybody. This is Linda G. Robert. You're back in the Groove Again coach, helping you live your best life now so you can love what you do. I shared on one of my last videos that while my life is great now, it wasn't always great. In fact, it sucked. It really sucked, especially in my 20s and 30s and 40s. You know, I shared that I was going to be doing some lives. I couldn't do a live today, so I'm going to be doing a video to tell you about my divorces and what led to my divorces. Now, the truth is that I've been married 3 times. Yes, 3 times. The first time I was 21, and then the second time I was 24, I think, or 23. And then the last marriage was when I was 36 or 37. I think it was around that age. Now, the first marriage wasn't a divorce. It was a death. So I was 21 when I got married. And this was to a young man that I kind of met on a dare. A little bit of history here. My mother and I had gone to a bar, and she dared me to pick up that young man that was sitting over there at the table. Now, why did she do that? Well, this is the type of relationship that my mother and I had. When I was younger, back as a young child, 11 or 12, my mother would bring men home. She actually even had me going out to one of the bars with her. And then some men would come home, and no, nothing happened to the one that did come home after coming back from the bar, but there were other experiences that did lead to some abuse. So that's the type of relationship my mother and I had when I was a young woman. But of course, then when she dared me to go pick up the young man in that corner there, I thought, okay, I'll show you that I've grown up and that I now know what to do. So I did. I went and I started chatting with Dan, was his name, and we eventually started hanging out and even spent the entire weekend together. That first weekend was spent together. And 7 months later, we were married. Now, that relationship was an abusive relationship. So during the whole, if I can call it courtship, while we were going out, there was some abuse. He tried to harm himself a few times, quite a few times actually. But still, it didn't matter. I stayed with him and agreed to marry him, even though I had tears in my eyes. I still agreed to marry him at that time because I thought I could change him. I really did think that I could change him, change his behaviors. 2 months after we were married, he passed. He passed away. So that marriage didn't end in a divorce, but it ended in a death. And thank goodness it did. Of course, at that time, I was in shock. And this is a part of the story that leads to my adultery, and that's going to be on another video. But I was in shock, and I didn't know how to handle that death. In fact, I didn't know how to manage my emotions around anything, for that fact. A few months after that, I started hanging out with his cousin. Let me tell you that story because it did lead to a marriage, and then that led to a divorce as well. So a few months after that, I started hanging out with his cousin. I had met his cousin in college. Now, it was always a dream of mine to date someone in college, which is why I had convinced Dan, my first husband, to go to college, because I thought it would be kind of cool to study together. So when I bumped into Jill, which is his cousin, I thought, hey, that's great. Let's get to know each other. as cousins. And this was, in fact, on a skiing trip, the same skiing trip that I was supposed to go the year before, the weekend that I had met Daniel. So we went on that skiing trip together. It was a college trip and had a really good time. It was fun. We became really good friends, and eventually we started living together. I think it was 6 or 7 months. You notice a pattern here? 6 or 7 months, we started living together, and then I got pregnant. And because he was looking for a job, he moved to a different province. And because I was pregnant and didn't want to be pregnant alone, I moved to that other province. And because I was pregnant, the family back home, his family back home, was planning a wedding. Yeah, I didn't really think about getting married. Actually, we didn't really talk about it, but the family did. And that's why we got married. We got married because we were expecting a child. Now, fast forward to almost 3 years later, we ended up in a divorce. The reason why is because, bottom line, of my adultery, and I'll talk more about that when I talk about my adultery, my promiscuity. That's going to be in another video. But to put it in a nutshell, when we were living in Edmonton, Alberta, which is where we moved to, I had a lot of affairs, and I got caught by his sister. We did move back to Ontario and eventually got divorced. The behaviors didn't change. I continued my behaviors. And finally, he did say, I want you to leave. I want you to move out. So eventually, I moved out with my 2 young children at the time. Let's see, one was 3.5 years old and the other one was 18 months old. So we split up. My behaviors continued, and then eventually we got divorced. So that's divorce number 1, husband number 2. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this with you not for me to rehash old memories, because it's difficult to talk about it. It's things that I've dealt with. I've gone through counseling to try to understand why I couldn't commit to a relationship. So I've done a lot of that work. But the reason I'm sharing it with you is because you need to know that although maybe you're suffering now, maybe you're having a lot of different relationships now, maybe you've been divorced a few times like I have, know that just because you messed up some relationships, including your relationship with yourself, doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. There's work to do. And of course, I'll talk more about that in other videos. So that's why I'm sharing that with you. It's not for you to know everything that I did in my life. It's for you to know that there is hope. There is a lot of hope. So I'm going to talk now more about the third husband, which was in my 30s. So we're talking about around 10 years after the second marriage. So by then, I had, of course, my children were younger. I think they were 7 and 9, something like that. They were older, I should say, 7 and 9. And at that time, they had big brothers. And so I was involved as a member, as a mother of big brothers, as a mother to young children who were in big brothers. And so I went to activities. I went to some big brother activities, which was really great. It was great for the kids, great for me too. And I met Mark during one of these activities. He started shooting snowballs at us, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So we saw each other a couple of times, and we just started dating. We started dating after a while. I don't remember how long we dated. I know that this might have been back in, let's see now, back in the early 90s. We met in the early 90s. And we got married in 95, 6 or 7. So we dated for a few years. So why did I get married to him? Okay, so I got married to him because I needed stability. And it wasn't necessarily something that I was totally aware of. Needed stability. My sons needed, a male role model. And he was a great male role model. He was, he had a very serious side, but a very fun side too. And I knew that with him, my life would be different. So that part was conscious. I did know that my life would be completely different. I knew the type of person he was. He was a man, and he still is, I think. He was a man that really cared a lot about his finances. So saving money was important to him, and going on trips was important to him. In fact, we went to Mexico years ago, back in, I think it might have been in 93, and we were going to get married then, but we didn't. I couldn't do it. So we had gone on a lot of different trips, and I thought, yeah, this is an enjoyable lifestyle. It's something that I started enjoying, and I knew the boys would appreciate it too. Now, at that time, when I decided to get married, I had also been seeing somebody else. I had been seeing this other man for years. And I really cared about this other man, but this other man wasn't the best person for me. Although I had these really warm feelings, in fact, I was in love with him. The other man had a completely different personality, and I know that he would have never wanted to marry me. So I made an intellectual decision when Mark asked me to marry him. I said, yes. This was after Mexico, because in Mexico I couldn't do it. I had said yes, but I changed my mind. And then months after, he asked me again, and I said yes. And it was done kind of in a very strange way. I was teaching at the time, and I remember specifically saying to my students, I have to go. This was around 1:30. I have to go because I'm getting married at 2:00. Basically, I had to meet him at the courthouse to get married. He was such a logical thinker, and in my mind, I didn't think that way, but it was calculated and planned. So we met at the courthouse. We got married at the courthouse. We had dinner with family and friends at a Chinese food restaurant, and after that, he went to work. And it was like really, really strange to me. That same night, I went out to the bar with a friend, a male friend, who happened to live in the basement, my basement at that time. And it was really strange for me. It was like I just got married. I was trying to make sense of it. And for the longest time, it didn't. It didn't make any sense. I was trying to analyze it and understand it intellectually and from my heart, and I couldn't. I couldn't understand why I did that. Right after our marriage, a couple of days after, we went to honeymoon, and I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel how I should have felt, right? How I could have felt. And that lasted for the year and a half until our divorce. And why did we get divorced? Guess. I committed adultery. That's right. That same man that I was in love with before I married him, before I married Mark, was who I had an adulterous relationship with. One night stand, but still. one night stand. And of course, my ex found out and quickly wanted to work on the separation agreement. Again, I had to sit down in front of the computer with him next to me. He was dictating what would go in this agreement, and he would only move out, we would only get separated, physically separated, after that agreement was signed. And there were things in the agreement that I didn't want, but he was still in the house, and I felt that I needed to sign that agreement. That was how I was going to get peace of mind, get him out of the house. And interestingly enough, at that time, we backdated the separation agreement to 6 months, which meant that after he left, 6 months after we left, we would get divorced, but we'd have to bring the papers to the courthouse. Next thing you know, we're divorced. So everything in his mind was calculated and very, very logical. And of course, that didn't really work for me. I needed to feel something. I didn't exactly feel the right emotions, right? I felt more, I don't want to say hatred, although those were words that I did use at one point. I didn't want to feel that way. I wanted to feel love, and I wanted to feel affection, and I wanted to feel passion. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know at that time that I wanted to feel that. Remember, I had 3 marriages quite close together, and I still couldn't commit to a relationship. And part of that is because I didn't really know what it was like to be, what it would be like, or what it could be like to be in a healthy relationship. I needed to start with withwha. It took me years to figure that out. I needed to start with having a good, healthy relationship with me. But then again, that took years. That didn't happen right away. So I hope that you now understand a little bit more about, my divorces and what led to them and why I got married to. And I'm hoping that when you listen to part of my story, there's a couple of more things I'm going to be sharing with you in the next, few videos or lives. I hope you're able to understand part of mine, and that you can maybe identify with some of it, with parts of it, and know that who you are today doesn't mean you're going to be like that forever. With some slight changes, and I mentioned, when you start loving yourself first, when you start putting yourself first, you start realizing that you're important. You're really what matters. When you start doing that, and some people, believe in God too, when you start putting maybe God first and your relationship with God first, that's when things take a turnaround. So I'm going to ask you, how can you put yourself first, or your relationship with God first, with your higher spirit? How can you do that? What might you need to do to put the air mask on you first instead of others, instead of putting the mask on somebody else first? Think about that, right? When you're in an airplane, they always suggest to put the mask on yourself first and then put it on the child, because you need to be healthy. You need to be able to feel good, feel healthy, feel spiritually connected, have a social network, have a career, or maybe have a great education, have sound relationships before you meet up with someone, or before you get more serious with someone and think or expect that things will be different, right? Like when I was with my last husband, I thought my life would be different, and I married him for those reasons. Wrong reason. The first man I married, I thought that I could change him. I wanted to change him because he was, abusive. Wrong, 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 wrong. You can't change anyone. Number two, I married because I was pregnant. I felt I didn't have a choice. Now, if this would be in our days now, because this was back in the 80s, many years ago, right? 40 years ago. I don't want to say it was the way things were, but back then, and because my ex's family were quite religious, they assumed and wanted us to get married, so we did. We just did. That's it. Now think about that. Think about what is really important to you. And I will see you in the next video. During the next video, I'm going to talk more about my use of drugs and talk more about that. And I might do that on a live as well. I couldn't do the live today. I might do the live next Thursday as well. Or, sorry, next Thursday, not next Thursday, Monday, the 18th, around 10 o'clock. Yeah. All right. This is Linda G. Robert, your Back in the Groove Again coach, helping you live your best life now so you can love what you do. Don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel and go to my website, lindagrobert.com, for more information. If you want to shoot me an email, please do so at backinthegrooveagain@gmail.com. All right. Take care. Bye, everybody.